Does sleeping with earplugs help you to overcome sleep problems or even improve the quality or the quantity of your sleep? When it comes to earplugs, there are a lot of different myths around it and a lot of different advice around it. And depending on what company or what resource you look at, there's going to be suggestions on how you even want to use earplugs or what kind of earplugs you might want to be using to help you sleep better, sleep more, and so on. But in this video, we're really going to look at a very practical perspective in relation to long-term insomnia and sleep problems. That's what I do in my practice. I work with clients who have basically tried every single thing on the market, including earplugs, and have had mixed experiences with these things. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of different scenarios, which will then help you to really figure out what might be the answer in your situation when it comes to earplugs and whether or not you want to use them or not to help yourself. Now, as I mentioned, earplugs have developed quite a lot over the years, and I often get approached by different companies to either sort of mention it to my clients or even test them out myself. So in a little bit, I'm going to talk to you about my personal experience with earplugs, but in context of my insomnia when I used to struggle, and also more recently when actually companies approach me to say, well, let's give it a go, and you can maybe experiment with some of these earplugs that we're producing at the moment. And I will share it with you from that personal perspective. But before we do that, as always, I wanted to welcome you back if you're part of my community already. If you're brand new, then this is the time to hit that little subscribe button and hit that little bell as well so that I can let you know when I post new videos, either on questions, how-to videos, or debunking myths, just like today's video. My work is very much around helping people like you who struggle with long-term insomnia and sleep problems to develop what I call sleep skills for life. And if you haven't yet come across any of my videos, then let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Beatrix Schmidt, and I'm a sleep coach, professional speaker, and the creator of a program called Sleep Skills for Life. And that's very much my way of helping people with practical tools, techniques, changes, different mindsets so they can really learn what it takes to sleep well consistently for many years to come. So let's turn our attention back to earplugs and some of these situations or some of these myths around it. But I'm going to start with my personal perspective. A lot of the times over the years, and I've been working with clients for 10 years now, I have been approached by companies who have either already launched or were launching a new type of earplug or a developed product. When it comes to earplugs, personally, I don't actually enjoy anything in my ear, and I never have. I remember at a time when I really struggled with insomnia and my mind was very, very active, and it turned into almost this sound sensitivity, which I will talk about a little bit later on. I have experimented with earplugs back then, but even the feeling of them being in my ear was so uncomfortable that I just couldn't keep doing it. There was a period of time when I was forcing myself to use earplugs, but I really just couldn't continue. It never felt good for me, and actually it made me feel more uncomfortable. So when a company approaches me, I always just say, thank you so much. I'm sure it's going to actually really help some of the clients you might have, but I personally have this view and I just really can't say yes to giving them a go because I know that I can't really have anything in my ear when I sleep. Now, that's actually often how I talk about it with my clients as well. There is this idea of sound sensitivity when it comes to long-term insomnia and sleep problems. Some people do have it, some people may not. So again, it depends on your situation. But this first scenario is very much about sound sensitivity. Well, what do I mean by that? Now, often sound sensitivity doesn't just appear in the middle of the night. We'll talk about that other version in a little bit. If you are sensitive to sounds during the day, and you often either tend to wear earphones, headphones, things like that, then we already know that the baseline for you is already existing sound sensitivity. But this will come from the daytime. So it's specifically if you already struggle during the day to really handle noise. A lot of the times that situation is quite different, and it is going to impact your sleep in some way, especially if you also have sleep problems. Because naturally, if you're sound sensitive during the day, that's not going to stop just because you climb into bed. That sound sensitivity often feels almost bigger when we're quiet and we're lying down in our bed and it's all dark around us. And some of the reasons I found that sound sensitivity is not best with earplugs in some versions is that the only thing it actually continues to develop is this fear around sound. But of course, if you are sound sensitive and you are using earplugs in the night, the first question you want to ask yourself is, does it really help you to improve your sleep, to actually feel like the quality and the quantity of your sleep is better while using your earplugs? A lot of the times what I found with clients who are naturally sound sensitive as well is using earplugs at night doesn't actually sort their problem out, because your mind will continue to embrace different noises, not just through the sound itself. And I'm sure that you probably already looked into this if you struggle with sort of the sound sensitivity anyway. Our mind consumes information about our environment in more than just one way. So hence, even if you use an earplug, sound is just one of those senses. Movement, vibration in the air, light exposure, all of those different things will influence how sensitive you might feel. So even if you're closing your eyes and it's dark around you, your mind will then strengthen some of the other senses in order to establish whether or not you are in a safe environment, whether or not there is something that you need to do about it. That is the job of the mind. So that's not abnormal. The job of the mind, especially at night, is to continue looking after us and keep us safe. If something like a loud noise comes in, you will naturally, a lot of the times, will be woken up because your mind is there to say, hey, listen, this is a bit sort of bigger than normal. Make sure you are going to be okay. So sound sensitivity at night doesn't always mean that by using earplugs, you're actually less disturbed. What I found with clients in that position is when they started using earplugs, they actually became a lot more tense or fidgety, or often actually it increased the amount of wakings they have at night, because now the sound is not something that your mind can use to differentiate between a good environment and maybe a little bit more uncomfortable or dangerous environment. So it can actually wake you up more often because it's not able to interpret the sound part as you're blocking it out. So with sound sensitivity that comes from the daytime, it's more important to really look at continuously using earplugs. Does it really sort your sleep problem out? Or does it actually have no difference at all? Or it seems like it's not actually helping at all? Now, when I work with clients who have sound sensitivity like this, what we really want to help is the mind not to take sound out of context and make it bigger than what it needs to be. I often also find that with sound sensitivity, a racing mind also comes into the picture. Often the clients I have worked with who have developed this idea of sound sensitivity during the day and then it improved or it impacted their sleep at night, also had a quite active and racy mind as well. So see, already we've got a combination issue here. So this is how I would suggest you start looking at your scenario if this sound sensitivity is what you've got. You've got to actually train the mind not to take it out of context and to allow you to relax physically, emotionally, and mentally as well while you sleep, so that you're not relying on your mind to really wake you up with smallest little things happening around you. The second situation that I often find with this sort of big topic of earplugs is when it actually comes to your partner. So I have worked with clients who have a long-term insomnia, sleep problems, whose partners were either, let's say, snoring or quite fidgety in bed, or maybe they had a small baby and they actually had a lot more of those nighttime wakings because of the baby. So again, this is where it's a family environment, whether or not it's to do with having a small baby or actually you just as a couple. When it comes to earplugs in these situations, a lot of the times what I found is people use them because they often get quite emotionally triggered or frustrated or any other emotion when this other person, whether or that's maybe a baby or their other half, either makes more noise or they're so exhausted that they just want to have some decent night of sleep. Now, when it comes to these situations, when the sensitivity to sound isn't there, so that's really important to establish. It's just that you get more frustrated by all these different noises around you. This can be, like I said, environment related mostly. What you want to do in those situations is, again, start looking at what is the emotion that's there first. So these situations are often quite emotional. You either get incredibly frustrated, crossed, disappointed, upset, because here we go again, this noise is disturbing you in some way. What we want to deal with in this situation is more the emotional component of why you are then using the earplugs to block the sound out. If you've ever seen either a small toddler sleeping in an incredibly loud environment during the day, you can see that they are capable, depending on the baby or the toddler, they are capable of sleeping very well in the middle of an incredibly loud environment. Now, over the years, as we become adults, often we almost get untrained from that skill, especially if you have experienced that as a small child. We start making different connections. Okay, so with this noise, I can't possibly fall asleep easily, or I can't possibly sleep through it because it's so incredibly frustrating to me. So that's where the emotional components often is a learned part. And we cannot train the mind not to put the emotion in the middle of it, which often means that emotionally you become more relaxed, which means you're not responding to this sound as much as you would have previously. So in those situations, the reason I would not recommend using earplugs continuously or even as a one-off is because you can teach your mind not to take a very normal sound out of context. So your partner breathing heavily or snoring, and I have had clients who learned to sleep with their other halves even though they were still snoring, because we retrain the mind so that it's not responding emotionally to a very normal part of the environment. That's the same with when I struggled and then overcame my insomnia. When I moved to a new place, let's say a different part of town or a new house, I would have that response for the first couple of days, depending on what noises the house was sort of experiencing or showing me. But it doesn't mean that I had to use earplugs to train my mind to relax about those very normal noises. So in this scenario, unfortunately, often couples end up sleeping in different rooms if they can. This is where, I talk about sleep divorce as well in a different video. You don't want to separate yourself from really having a comfortable place to sleep in based on this frustration or based on this inability that you can't seem to overcome this noise related issue. Really, the way forward with that is to figure out even what is the emotion that is triggering. Is it triggering frustration? Most of the time it is frustration that it triggers because of this other thing or because of this other person, I can't possibly sleep well. But you want to actually have the conversation, actually look at what can you do about the situation rather than just allowing it to always cause frustration. So that's the second idea, where its normal environment with normal noises. Then we look at the third part. And the third part might also link to the previous two that I mentioned, is when you are actually very overactive. This is quite common for more extroverted type people, but again, there can be a couple of other personality traits that link to this. If you're always a very active type person, you tend to actually have more of a thinker trait as well, more of an active mind trait. Now, when we stop doing things and we climb into bed and we want to maybe fall asleep, but we don't know how to, sometimes the reason people use earplugs is because they also then use something like listening to either sounds or music or a podcast or anything else in relation to using the earplug too. So these are more the advanced kind of earplugs where you might actually be able to listen to something while you are also blocking out the rest of the noise. Now, with overthinker types or thinker types, the earplugs are therefore now used for distraction and often putting a blanket over an overactiveness of the mind. Now, I talk about overactive mind in other videos as well, but in this one, I'm just going to explain the relationship between earplugs and why I would actually suggest that you don't use earplugs in these situations. Overactive mind is not based on a sound relationship. Overactiveness of the mind is very much an internal thing that happens, and it's got very little to do with sound as an external thing. Now, if you use earplugs and you're playing something like music or maybe listening to a podcast, what you're doing is you're feeding your mind with more information. But if you're climbing into bed and you want to improve your sleep, often what happens is, let's say when the thing that you're listening to stops, you notice that your mind becomes racing again. So using the earplugs with something like other noise or sound is not actually sorting out the main problem, the bottom line problem. So these cases is when you got to deal with the overactiveness of the mind first, because the earplugs is simply not suitable for that situation. Earplugs will give you a sound, but it doesn't sort out how active your mind actually is. The two are just too far apart from each other. And if you're also an extroverted type, then lying down and not using your time for something very proactive or practical or action driven means that you're not quite comfortable necessarily lying down, especially if you can't sleep well. Again, I find this with client work as well. Often the earplugs become this way of just entertaining yourself for longer by listening to something because, well, I can't sleep anyway. So really looking at the root cause of what's happening is really important here. You can learn, even if you've got overactive mind, to fall asleep within a shorter period of time without earplugs, so that you're not actually just putting a blanket over something that could be solved in a longer, more sustainably practical way. So these are a couple of different scenarios that I wanted to share with you. When it comes to this myth of earplugs improving sleep or sorting out sleep problems, whilst there is a difference in different situations, for some people they do very well with it. Other people, it actually doesn't really cause any positive influence or very, very varied influence. So that's how you would want to make a decision is, if you haven't yet used earplugs, I would suggest you first really look at what is the reason why I would even want to use earplugs. If you have historically used earplugs, then you already have some information about whether or not it helps you. Is it reliably sorting the problem out? And can you really develop optimized, great quality, and good enough amount of sleep so that you can feel recharged in the morning? Now, I know that earplugs are often very personal decisions as well. But I'm here to just give you, I guess, a word of warning when it comes to buying anything physically driven. Our body and our mind and our entire physiology is developed in a way that we don't require any external thing in order to create sleep. Whilst we might think it's going to help, but our body never developed in a way that we need earplugs historically. We can sleep well without those, but it's about learning what it takes to really develop those skill sets so that your mind, your body, and your emotions are really calm so that it's not creating a problem just based on some level of noise around you. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'm very curious always about this earplug situation with clients because every single client has been different in the past, and how I would deal with it was different in the past. But this is where you want to look at it a very practical way. Look at it really from your perspective and whatever's going on for you, not just during the day, but obviously at night as well. So thank you for watching, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button below, hit that little bell as well so I can let you know when I post the next video, and hit that like button too if you have enjoyed what I've talked to you about in today's video. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.